In the summer of 1871, when the American West was still a restless frontier stitched together by iron rails and fragile treaties, a boy named Samuel Reed pressed his ear against the desert floor and claimed he could hear voices. They were not the whispers of wind through sagebrush, nor the distant rumble of wagon wheels crossing the dry earth. Samuel insisted they were older than the railroad, older than the Republic, older even than the memory of maps. The town of Silver, Mesa, Nevada, did not believe him. Silver Mesa was a boomtown carved from ambition. Its wooden saloons leaned against one another like conspirators. Its church bell rang each Sunday with more hope than faith. Its people miners from Pennsylvania, freedmen from the South, immigrants from Ireland and China had come chasing veins of silver that glittered like buried lightning beneath the earth. But the desert around them was ancient and patient, and it remembered everything. Samuel was 12 when he first heard the echoes. His father, Thomas Reed, was a railroad engineer working for the Central Pacific extension that would connect remote mining territories to the greater arteries of American commerce. Thomas believed in steel, in progress, in the certainty that every problem could be solved by measurement and sweat. Samuel believed in stories. He had grown up listening to the Paiute elders who sometimes traded woven baskets in town. One of them, an old man called Numatavi, told him that the land beneath Silver Mesa had once been a crossing place, a sacred ground where tribes met under a rare celestial alignment. According to legend, the earth there did not merely hold bones, it held memory. The ground listens, Numatavi told him once, tracing circles in the dust, and sometimes, when it is disturbed, it answers. When the mining company began blasting deeper shafts than ever before, Samuel began to hear the answers. At first it was a vibration, a low, humming tremor he felt through the soles of his boots. Then, one evening after a controlled explosion split the western ridge, he knelt near the fractured rock and pressed his ear to the soil. He swore he heard chanting. Not in English, not in Paiute. Something older. His father dismissed it as imagination sharpened by isolation. The town doctor suggested nervous sensitivity. The pastor warned against entertaining pagan superstitions. But within weeks, others began reporting strange phenomena. Miners' work in Shaft 12 claimed their lantern flames flickered violently in sealed tunnels. A surveyor reported compass deviations that made no geological sense. A shipment of silver, or freshly extracted, was found inexplicably tarnished, blackened, as though aged decades overnight. And then came the collapse. On September 3rd, 1871, a section of Shaft 12 gave way, trapping 6 men underground. Among them was Thomas Reed. The rescue operation lasted 3 days. Timber supports were hauled in from Carson City. Volunteers dug through choking dust, their lungs burning with each breath. Samuel waited outside the shaft entrance, listening. Not for pickaxes, but for the echoes. He heard them again, louder now, not chanting, weeping. When Thomas was finally pulled from the wreckage, he was alive but altered. He spoke little. He avoided eye contact. And he carried in his pocket a fragment of stone unlike any found in the region. It was smooth, dark, and etched with symbols no one recognized. News of the collapse reached San Francisco, then Washington. Investors worried. Silver Mesa's productivity had dipped. Rumors of cursed land spread faster than telegrams. In October, a federal geologist named Dr. Eleanor Whitaker arrived in town. Dr. Whitaker was an anomaly, an 1871 American woman, educated in mineralogy and paleontology. formerly of the Smithsonian's expanding research corps. She had spent years cataloging fossils in the Badlands and mapping sediment layers along the Mississippi River. She did not believe in curses, but she believed in anomalies. When she examined the stone fragment Thomas had retrieved, her skepticism faltered. The markings were geometric yet organic spirals, intersecting with linear grids, resembling neither Native American petroglyphs nor known European scripts. More perplexing was the material itself. It was neither basalt nor obsidian nor any volcanic glass typical of Nevada's geological profile. It contained traces of an alloy that, by all known science of the era, should not exist. Microscopic flecks of iridium. In 1871, iridium was rarer than platinum. Dr. Whittaker ordered a controlled excavation of the collapsed shaft. What they uncovered would challenge not only Silver Mesa, but the very narrative of American history. 30 feet below the original tunnel floor, beneath sediment layers dated to prehistoric lakebeds, the miners struck something artificial, a chamber, perfectly cylindrical, carved from stone harder than granite. Inside the chamber were walls inscribed with the same spirals and grids as Thomas's fragment. At the center stood a pillar 4 feet high, metallic, unmarred by corrosion, despite its apparent antiquity. When Samuel descended into the chamber for the first time, escorted reluctantly by Dr. Whittaker, he felt the hum again, stronger, resonant. Dr. Whittaker ran her hands across the inscriptions, her mind racing through possible explanations, lost civilizations, Precolumbian, transoceanic contact, elaborate hoaxes. But no hoax could account for the geological layering above the chamber. It had been buried long before recorded human settlement in North America. Carbon dating did not yet exist. Radiometric techniques were decades away. They were left with intuition and incomplete science, and the echoes. Word spread cautiously. The federal government classified the discovery as a matter of national geological interest. Soldiers arrived. Access to the chamber was restricted. Silver Mesa became a guarded town. Samuel, however, remained a variable no one anticipated. One evening, as twilight painted the desert purple, he slipped past the perimeter and entered the chamber alone. He approached the central pillar. For the first time, he touched it. The hum transformed into a vibration that traveled through his bones. The symbols on the walls shimmered faintly, not with visible light, but with a subtle distortion of air, like heat rising from asphalt. And Samuel understood not the language, not the origin, but the intention. The chamber was not a tomb. It was a recorder. The spirals represented cycles, astronomical, geological, perhaps even biological. The grids mapped coordinates, not of land, but of time. The pillar was an instrument. When he pressed both palms against it, the echoes ceased. In their place came images, not hallucinations, but impressions layered over reality. He saw the desert, underwater, a vast inland sea reflecting unfamiliar constellations. He saw structures along its shore, built by figures indistinct yet deliberate. He saw the chamber constructed as the waters receded, sealed deliberately, preserved. And he saw a final scene, a sky streaked with fire. An impact. Modern science would later confirm that North America bears scars of ancient meteor strikes. The Chicxulub impact that had ended the dinosaurs. Smaller, localized events scattered across millennia. But in 1871, the concept of extraterrestrial catastrophe remained speculative. Samuel staggered back from the pillar. When Dr. Whittaker found him, hours later, he was conscious but pale. He spoke only one sentence. It was built to remember the sky falling. Dr. Whittaker faced a decision that would define her career. She could report the chamber as an anomaly of unknown origin risking ridicule and dismissal. Or she could protect it, study it quietly, and allow history to catch up with evidence. She chose the latter. So over the next month, she documented every inscription by hand. She sketched the chamber's dimensions. She sent coded letters to trusted colleagues in Boston and New York, hinting at pre-human architectural formations. Thomas Reed recovered physically, but never fully emotionally. He refused to descend again. At night, he confessed to Samuel that during the collapse, trapped in darkness, he had heard the same hum. "It wasn't frightening," Thomas said softly. "It felt like being watched by something patient." Silver production in the town dwindled. Investors withdrew. By 1873, the Panic of 1873 triggered a nationwide economic depression. Mines closed. Families left. Mesa faded into near abandonment. The chamber was sealed. Officially, it did not exist. Decades passed. The United States industrialized. Skyscrapers rose. Telegraph lines gave way to telephones. The Wright brothers lifted into the air. 2 world wars reshaped the globe. Samuel Reed grew into adulthood, carrying a secret that felt heavier than the desert itself. He became a teacher in California, then later a quiet librarian in Sacramento. He never married. He wrote journals filled with sketches of spirals and grids. Dr. Whittaker, in her later years, became a respected but controversial figure in geology. She hinted in lectures that human history is a chapter in a much longer terrestrial narrative. Few understood her meaning. When she died in 1912, her personal notebooks vanished. It was not until 1968, amid the fervor of the space race, that Silver Mesa resurfaced in federal archives. A graduate student researching Cold War geological surveys stumbled upon classified 19th century reports referencing subterranean cylindrical formation, Nevada Territory. The timing was uncanny. In 1969, as Apollo 11 prepared to land on the moon, America was thinking about impact, about celestial bodies, about the fragility of planets. A joint team from the U.S. Geological Survey and NASA reopened the site. What? They found astonished even modern scientists. The chamber remained intact. The pillars still hummed. Advanced spectrograph analyses confirmed the presence of iridium concentrations consistent with meteorite material. Isotopic ratios suggested the alloy incorporated extraterrestrial elements. Radiometric dating of sediment above the chamber placed its burial at least 12,000 years ago, predating known civilizations in North America. The inscriptions, when mapped digitally, aligned with known meteor impact sites across the continent. It was not merely a recorder of one event, it was a warning system. The implications were staggering. If an unknown prehistoric civilization had possessed the knowledge to predict or document meteor impacts, then human history, at least as taught, was incomplete. Yet no skeletal remains, no tools, no artifacts beyond the chamber itself were found. It was as if the builders had constructed only memory. In 1972, amid political tension and shifting priorities, funding for the project was quietly cut. The chamber was sealed again. Public disclosure would have invited conspiracy theories, religious upheaval, geopolitical exploitation. Instead, it became a classified footnote, but not entirely forgotten. In 2004, a wildfire swept through the Nevada desert, exposing portions of the long-abandoned Silver Mesa site. satellite imaging detected unusual subsurface geometry. This time, the world was different. The internet connected curiosity instantly. Independent researchers, historians, and citizen scientists demanded transparency. Declassified documents from the 19th century surfaced online. Among them were fragments of Dr. Whittaker's sketches, digitized copies of spirals and grids. Astrophysicists analyzing the patterns noted correlations with periodic cometary cycles. One pattern aligned disturbingly with the projected near-Earth object trajectory scheduled for 2032. The echoes beneath the sand were no longer metaphorical. They were data. Samuel Reed had died in 1943, but his journals survived, donated anonymously to a university archive. A bet within their pages. Researchers found detailed descriptions of the chamber's hum frequency approximations remarkably close to low frequency. Electromagnetic emissions detected during meteor atmospheric entry. He had not possessed the vocabulary of modern physics, but he had listened, and he had recorded. In 2021, as climate change, pandemics, and political polarization dominated headlines, a small coalition of scientists petitioned Congress to revisit Silver Mesa officially. They argued not for sensationalism, but for preparedness. Earth has been struck before. It will be struck again. The chamber beneath Silver Mesa suggested that someone long before recorded history had understood this, and had chosen to remember. When the chamber was opened publicly for the first time in 2024, broadcast live to millions of American viewers, the reaction was not panic. It was awe. Standing in that cylindrical room, beneath inscriptions older than cities, Dr. Maya Hernandez, planetary defense researcher, placed her hand gently on the pillar. She did not hear chanting. She heard a steady hum. "Hestia," she said into the camera, her voice trembling slightly, "is not just what we write in books. It is what the earth writes in stone." The human touch of the story was not in alien builders or lost civilizations. It was in a boy who listened, in a father who doubted yet loved, in a scientist who chose curiosity over fear, in a nation mature enough, finally, to confront the possibility that we are part of a much older narrative today. Silver Mesa is no longer a ghost town. It is a research site and memorial. Visitors walk carefully through preserved mining structures before descending into the chamber. They are asked to remain silent for 1 full minute. In that silence, some claim they feel nothing. Others claim they feel a vibration beneath their feet. But all leave with the same realization. We are not the first to look at the sky and wonder when it might fall. And perhaps we will not be the last to build. Something that remembers. Because beneath this sand, beneath ambition and industry and politics, there are echoes, and they are still speaking. And for the first time in American history, the past did not feel distant. It felt unfinished. The reopening of the Silver Mesa Chamber in 2024 changed more than academic discourse. It altered dinner-table conversations across the country. Parents who once helped their children with homework about ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia now found themselves answering questions about something far closer to home. Who built it? Were they human? Why didn't they leave anything else behind? The questions echoed louder than the hum of the pillar itself. Dr. Maya Hernandez refused sensationalism. She stood before Congress in early 2025 and delivered testimony that was calm, measured, and profoundly human. "I'm not here to rewrite history recklessly," she said. "We are here to acknowledge that history is incomplete. The Silver Mesa structure demonstrates advanced understanding of astronomical cycles and impact prediction. Whether built by a previously unknown human culture or a lost branch of early civilization, it proves one thing: our ancestors understood cosmic vulnerability. The phrase stuck. Cosmic vulnerability. It was both scientific and intimate. America, a nation built on resilience and reinvention, now faced a truth carved in stone. Survival has always required preparation. Deep within the chamber, a new discovery unfolded. Using hyperspectral imaging and quantum resonance scanning, researchers identified the microscopic channels within the pillar, nanoscale conduits that reacted subtly to fluctuations in Earth's magnetic field. The pillar was not passive, it was responsive. During a solar storm in late 2025, minor geomagnetic disturbances triggered a measurable change in the HEMS frequency. Instruments recorded a shift, and inscriptions along the walls faintly glowed under ultraviolet analysis. Not light, energy. Encoded. Astrophysicists cross-referenced the frequency shift with solar flare intensity and discovered correlation patterns. This chamber did not merely record meteor impacts. It responded to celestial stressors. It was a planetary sensor. As data accumulated, something even more astonishing emerged. The spiral patterns on the chamber walls, when converted into digital topography, matched orbital cycles of near-Earth objects over tens of thousands of years. One sequence, larger and more prominent than the others, corresponded with a massive impact event estimated around 10,800 BCI, a period associated with abrupt climate cooling known as the Younger Dryas. The implications rippled through academic circles. The Younger Dryas hypothesis had long debated the possibility of a comet or fragmented meteor triggering widespread environmental upheaval. Critics argued evidence was inconclusive. Now, beneath a Nevada desert once dismissed as barren, stood a structure seemingly built to commemorate precisely such an event. The chamber did not specify destruction. It specified recurrence. Yet amid all the data and debates, the most powerful moments remained personal. Visitors continued descending into the chamber in small, controlled groups. Among them was a retired coal miner from West Virginia who stood quietly beneath the inscriptions and whispered, "We dig into the earth to take from it. But maybe we were meant to listen." A Navajo astrophysics student knelt near the wall carvings and traced spirals gently without touching. "My grandmother told me stories of the sky beings," she said softly. "I used to think they were metaphor. Now I think maybe metaphor is just memory surviving. A father brought his daughter, the same age Samuel Reed had been in 1871. The girl closed her eyes during the minute of silence and later told her father she felt like the earth was breathing. Human touch did not diminish science. It deepened it. In 2027, a breakthrough occurred that forced the world's attention sharply back to Silver Mesa, a newly detected asteroid-designated 2027P Zoni foreshowed a small but non-zero probability of Earth impact in 2032. The probability was less than 1%. Statistically insignificant. Emotionally overwhelming. As media outlets reignited fears, researchers returned to the chamber's spiral data. They found something chilling. A cluster of markings aligned not only with known ancient impacts, but with orbital resonance cycles, approximately 5,000 years apart. Within that cluster, one spiral segment corresponded almost exactly to PX-14's projected trajectory window. It was not prophecy. It was pattern recognition. The builders of the chamber had observed long-term celestial rhythms. They understood. NASA, working with international partners, accelerated planetary defense initiatives. Kinetic impactor strategies were refined. Orbital deflection simulations intensified. But within the chamber, a quieter revelation unfolded. Dr. Hernandez began to suspect that the pillar's resonance shifts were not merely reactive, they were predictive. The nanoscale channels responded subtly to gravitational perturbations, amplifying faint oscillations in Earth's magnetosphere caused by approaching mass. If confirmed, the chamber functioned as a passive gravitational early warning system operational for over 12 millennia. How could such technology exist before recorded metallurgy? The question haunted researchers. One hypothesis gained traction. The builders were not technologically advanced in the modern industrial sense, but they possessed extraordinary observational longevity. Instead of machines dependent on power grids and software updates, they built something geological timeless. They engineered memory into stone. As 2032 approached, PX-14's probability of impact diminished with each refined calculation. By late 2031, it was effectively zero. Relief swept across headlines. Yet within the chamber, something unprecedented occurred. Despite PX-14's safe passage, the pillar's hum intensified briefly during its closest approach. Not dramatically, but measurably. It suggested sensitivity beyond catastrophic thresholds. The chamber did not differentiate between disaster and near-miss. It recorded proximity. It remembered risk. In early 2033, a multidisciplinary symposium convened in Silver Mesa itself. Historians, astrophysicists, anthropologists, indigenous leaders, engineers. They did not gather to debate aliens. They gathered to discuss continuity. An anthropologist proposed that perhaps the builders were ancestors of early North American populations whose knowledge systems were erased by cataclysm and time. Oral traditions of skyfire, great floods, and earth-shaking existed across cultures. Maybe the chamber was the physical remnant of a worldview that understood Earth as dynamic and fragile. An engineer added, "We think progress means complexity, but maybe true resilience means simplicity that lasts." A Paiute elder, descendant of those who once walked the Silver Mesa region, stood slowly and said, "You call it new discovery. We call it old remembering." Silence followed, not uncomfortable, reverent. The human story circled back, inevitably, to Samuel Reed. His journals, once obscure, became required reading in university courses exploring early anomaly documentation. One passage in particular resonated deeply. "The hum does not frighten me. It feels like standing beside something older than fear. If it is a warning, it is also a gift." Historians noted how a boy without formal scientific training described phenomena later validated by instruments a century beyond his time. He did not seek fame. He did not claim prophecy. He listened, and because he listened, others eventually did too. By 2035, Silver Mesa had transformed into more than a research site. It became a symbol. School children across America learned about the chamber not as proof of extraterrestrial interference, but as testimony to human humility. The United States, often defined by expansion and innovation, found itself defined by something quieter: stewardship. Congress established the Planetary Memory Initiative, funding global projects aimed at creating long-term data archives capable of surviving millennia vaults carved into mountains. Inscriptions etched in synthetic sapphire, knowledge encoded redundantly across continents. Inspired by the chamber, scientists prioritized longevity over convenience, because civilizations are fragile, but memory can endure. In the final years of Dr. Maya Hernandez's career, she often returned alone to the chamber late at night, gear, without cameras, without instruments. She would sit cross-legged on the cool stone floor and close her eyes. She once confessed to a colleague, "It's the only place where time feels honest." In that cylindrical room, beneath Spiro's odor, grids mapping celestial rhythms beyond individual lifetimes, human ego shrank to appropriate scale. The chamber did not glorify its builders. It did not claim dominion. It simply endured. One winter evening in 2038, a minor earthquake trembled through Nevada, harmless, barely newsworthy. But inside the chamber, sensors recorded a brief harmonic resonance, a momentary alignment between tectonic vibration and pillar frequency. For a fraction of a second, the hum deepened into a tone audible to the human ear. Seb researchers present Frost. The tone was not loud, but it was clear, like a single sustained note on a distant cello, and then it was gone. Later analysis revealed that the harmonic frequency matched neither the quake's epicenter pattern, nor any known industrial interference. It was internal, responsive, alive, in the only way stone can be alive. As the 2040s approached, America faced its usual cycles of challenge and renewal: political shifts, technological revolutions, cultural transformations. Through it all, Silver Mesa remained constant. Tourists still descended in silence. Scientists still recorded data. Children still pressed their palms gently to the cool air near the pillar, imagining what Samuel read, once felt. No definitive answer ever emerged about who built the chamber. No skeletal remains surfaced. No companion structures were found. The mystery persisted. But perhaps that was the point. Certainty can close the mind. Mystery keeps it open. If you stand today in the Nevada desert at dusk, when the wind moves low across the sand and the sky turns the color of fading embers, you might feel something subtle beneath your feet. Not fear, not prophecy, just continuity. Beneath highways and satellite dishes, beneath economic cycles and election seasons, beneath even the memory of boomtowns and railroads, the earth holds layers of story. Silver Mesa is only one chapter, but it reminds us of something essential. We are temporary. The sky is restless. And memory, if carved carefully enough, can outlive empires. Somewhere, in a quiet archive, Samuel Reed's final journal entry remains preserved behind the glass. He wrote it in 1942, 1 year before his death. "If the sky falls again, I hope they will not panic. I hope they will remember that someone before them also looked up, felt small, and chose to build something that listened. Beneath the sand, the echoes never stopped. We just finally learned how to hear them." And then, just when the world thought it understood the Chambora's recorder, as warning as monuments, something changed that began quietly in 2041. A doctoral candidate named Delilah Brooks, specializing in computational linguistics and archaeosymbolism, proposed something radical. Instead of mapping the spiral strictly to orbital mechanics, she wondered whether the inscriptions could represent layered information, astronomical data intertwined with biological cycles. Why assume it only speaks of the sky? She asked during a symposium. What if it also speaks of us? Using deep learning pattern analyses trained on ancient scripts, genomic sequences, and climatological records, Lila began comparing the spiral intervals to long-term human population bottlenecks. The results stunned her. Certain large spiral nodes corresponded not only with impact events, but with dramatic reductions in genetic diversity periods when humanity nearly vanished. The chamber was not just recording rocks from space, it was recording survival, if true. The builders had witnessed catastrophe on a scale almost incomprehensible to modern society. But more importantly, they had survived it, and they had chosen to leave behind a structure that did not glorify themselves, but warned their descendants. Lila presented her findings cautiously. The scientific community debated fiercely. Correlation did not guarantee causation, yet the statistical alignment was strong enough to justify further inquiry. Inside the chamber, new scans revealed something previously overlooked: faint microetchings between the larger spirals. Under magnification, they formed repeating sequences, not random scratches, but deliberate patterns. They resembled waveforms, and when converted into audio frequencies, something extraordinary happened. For the first time in recorded history, the chamber's silent inscriptions produced sound low, rhythmic, almost like breathing. The audio reconstruction spread across research labs nationwide. Acoustic engineers filtered noise artifacts and isolated harmonic structures. The waveform displayed repeating intervals that mirrored Earth's Schumann. Resonances, the natural electromagnetic frequencies generated between the planet's surface, air, and the ionosphere. It was as if the chamber was tuned not just to celestial bodies, but to Earth itself. One researcher whispered during playback, "It sounds like the planet's heartbeat." The phrase trended online within hours, but beyond poetry lay deeper implications. If the builders encoded planetary resonance into stone, they possessed understanding not only of impacts, but of planetary systems as living processes. They did not separate sky from soil, that they understood connection. In 2043, another unexpected event occurred. A routine maintenance scan detected a structural anomaly beneath the original chamber floor. An echo below the echo, ground-penetrating radar revealed a secondary cavity, smaller and deeper. Excavation proceeded with painstaking caution. What they uncovered reshaped everything. The second chamber was not cylindrical. It was spherical, perfectly proportioned. At its center floated not physically, but magnetically suspended a small crystalline object, embedded within a lattice of the same iridium-infused alloy found in the pillar. Unlike the upper chamber, this room contained no spirals, only a single inscription etched above the entry. Passage, a line of symbols that had never appeared elsewhere. For months, translation eluded researchers. Then Lila Brooks made a connection. She compared the symbol sequence with early proto-linguistic structures reconstructed from multiple ancient language families. The pattern resembled not a warning, but a declaration. After careful consensus review, the translation proposal was unveiled. "We remember, so you would not have to begin again in darkness." The words struck the public like a quiet thunder. For centuries, humanity had assumed itself the starting point of meaningful history. Now, evidence suggests that continuity interrupted, fractured, but persistent. The spherical chamber's crystal object became the focus of intense study. When subjected to non-invasive scanning, it revealed internal lattice structures arranged in patterns resembling molecular chains. DNA-like, but not biological. It was data storage, encoded physically, durable beyond magnetic drives, beyond digital decay. Researchers speculated that it contained knowledge, perhaps astronomical records, perhaps cultural memory. Decoding it would require technology, still evolving. But its intention was clear. This was not merely survival. This was inheritance. Outside of laboratories and government briefings, ordinary Americans grappled with a new kind of humility. History textbooks, expanded chapters, museums, indigenous narratives, long marginalized, were revisited with renewed respect. The idea that advanced knowledge could exist without industrial infrastructure forced a cultural reckoning. Maybe wisdom was not linear. Maybe it rose and fell like tides, taught in classrooms across the country. Children debated a new question. If they could survive, why couldn't we? It was not about asteroid fear anymore. It was about responsibility. In 2045, the first Parsha decode of the crystal lattice succeeded using quantum tunneling microscopy and AI-assisted reconstruction. Scientists extracted fragments of structured information, not images, language in the traditional sense, but relational data, star positions relative to Earth across millennia, climate oscillation graphs, magnetic field fluctuations, and something else. Repeating sequence at the end of every Mazoj major dataset, Pattern identical to the chamber's original hum. Frequency. It was a signature, like an author signing a book, except the author was not an individual. It was a civilization by mid-century. Silver Mesa had become more than a site. It was a turning point. Nations collaborated on global impact defense networks with unprecedented unity. Planetary monitoring systems integrated geological and astronomical data seamlessly. The chamber had taught humanity a simple but profound lesson. The universe does not operate in isolation, and neither should we. Yet even as technology advanced, even as decode efforts accelerated, the most powerful experiences remained deeply human. One autumn evening in 2048, a storm rolled unexpectedly across the Nevada desert. Lightning flickered against the horizon, thunder rolling low and distant. Inside the chamber, a small group of researchers paused their work as the pillars hum, subtly synchronized with the storms, electromagnetic pulses, for a fleeting moment. Natural sky and the ancient stone resonated together. Dr. Harandez, now older, slower, but still present, placed her hand near the pillar once more. "I used to think this was about warning us," she said quietly, "but I think it's about reminding us." "Of what?" Young intern asked. She smiled faintly. "That we are part of something that survives. When historians look back at the early 21st century, they may note political turbulence, climate crises, technological revolutions, but they will also mark the rediscovery of Silver Mesa as a subtle pivot, a moment when humanity shifted from conquest toward continuity." Samuel Reed could never have imagined quantum computers or planetary defense arrays, but he understood something essential. Without them, he listened. He felt small beneath the sky, and instead of turning away, he leaned closer. Today, as the sun sets over the Nevada desert and the air cools into stillness, visitors descend once more into the chamber. They stand in silence, not because they expect revelation, but because silence itself is rare in a noisy age. Beneath their feet, beneath sediment and stone and 12,000 years of forgotten courage, the pillar hums softly, steady, patient, not demanding belief, not insisting on answers, simply present. A memory carved in geology, a whisper from ancestors unnamed, a reminder that long before satellites orbited and rockets pierced the sky, someone stood beneath falling stars, survived the fire, and chose to build not a monument to themselves, but a promise that, and beneath this sand, the echoes continue, waiting, listening. And then, in the quiet decades that followed, something even more profound began to take shape, not beneath this sand, but within the people who came to stand above it. By 2052, Silver Mesa was no longer treated as an anomaly. It was treated as a teacher. Universities established interdisciplinary programs called continuity studies blending planetary science, archaeology, systems engineering, and ethics. The central question was no longer what destroyed them, but rather what allowed them to endure long enough to leave this behind. Because survival, everyone realized, is not accidental at that scale. It requires foresight and cooperation and restraint. The spherical chamber's crystal archive continued yielding fragments. Progress was slow, careful, almost reverent. Each decoded cluster required months of verification. One evening in early spring, Lila Brooks, now leading the Decode initiative, sat alone in the lab reviewing a new reconstruction. The sequence wasn't astronomical, it wasn't geological, it was structural. A diagram, a blueprint, not of the chamber, but of something far larger, when projected in 3 dimensions. The blueprint resembled an enormous ring structure, not in space, but on Earth, a ring of sites. Silver Mesa was only one node. The design indicated 12 locations positioned along tectonic boundaries, and geomagnetic intersections across the globe. The realization stole her breath. The chamber was not singular. It was part of a network. Within weeks, research teams cross-referenced the coordinates with known geological anomalies, aligned with mysterious subterranean formations in Central Asia. One corresponded with an unexplored basalt cavity beneath the Sahara. Another appeared to match seismic irregularities beneath Antarctic ice. The United States government faced a choice: share the data globally or guard it. In a decision historians would later call pivotal, they chose transparency, because the chamber had already taught them something vital. Knowledge hoarded does not survive. Knowledge shared might. International expeditions launched. Some sites proved natural geological formations, nothing more. But 3 revealed structures eerily similar in composition to Silver Mesa's chamber, cylindrical cavities with metallic cores embedded deep beneath sediment layers. Each one contained variations of spiral inscriptions. Each one hummed. Different frequencies. Same intention. The network was real. As global collaboration intensified, a theory crystallized. The builders were not confined to a single region. Clever, they were distributed. A civilization, or perhaps a loose confederation of cultures united by a shared recognition of planetary fragility. Instead of erecting towering monuments that erosion could claim, they embedded memory in Earth's most stable layers. They chose depth over height, endurance over spectacle. It was a philosophy radically different from much of recorded human architecture. In 2058, during excavation of the Antarctic note preserved beneath miles of ice, a discovery reshaped everything once more. Within that chamber lay not only a pillar and crystal archive, but skeletal remains, carefully arranged, not in burial posture, in seated alignment around the central structure, 6 individuals, preserved by cold and mineralization. DNA analysis confirmed they were human, genetically consistent with ancient Homo sapiens populations, yet belonging to a lineage that had diverged and disappeared thousands of years ago. They had not fled catastrophe. They had stayed guardians, witnesses. The realization brought resetters to silence. This was no alien intervention, no extraterrestrial architects. It was us, an earlier us, smaller in number, perhaps battered by impact and climate collapse, but capable of astonishing foresight. Wam-covered inscription from the Antarctic chamber, translated after painstaking cross-reference, offered a line that would echo through history. We are not the first beginning. We are the memory between endings. It reframed everything. Human history was not a straight ascent. It was a series of fragile recoveries. And at least once before, our ancestors had nearly vanished, yet chosen to preserve knowledge for descendants they would never meet. In America, the cultural shift deepened. The myth of endless growth gave way slowly to a culture of durable design. Cities began constructing public archives carved into bedrock repositories of art, science, and story designed to endure millennia. Infrastructure planning extended beyond election cycles into century-scale resilience models. The Planetary Memory Initiative expanded into schools, encouraging children to think not only of careers but of legacy. "What would you build that lasts 1,000 years?" became a common classroom prompt. Some answered, forests. Some, water systems. Some, kindness. Meanwhile, back in Nevada, Silver Mesa's chamber continued humming. Tourism had plateaued, intentionally limited to protect the site. But those who visited often described a quiet emotional shift, not fear, not even awe, but connection, a sense that time was layered, not linear. One evening, a boy about 12 years old pressed his ear to the stone floor despite clear instructions not to touch the structure. Security approached gently. "Did you hear something?" the guard asked. The boy nodded. "What did it sound like?" He thought for a moment. "Like waiting." The guard smiled softly. "Yeah," he said. "That's about right. By 2065. Planetary defense technology had advanced to the point where moderate-sized near-Earth objects could be deflected reliably. Humanity was no longer helpless against the sky. But something unexpected accompanied that progress. Gratitude. For the first time in recorded civilization, humanity could look upward not only with fear but with preparedness rooted in ancient continuity. The chamber beneath Silver Mesa had not given them advanced weapons. It had given them perspective. And perspective, it turned out, was the more powerful inheritance. Late in her life, Lila Brooks recorded a final documentary interview inside the chamber. Her hair had grayed. Her voice carried decades of discovery. "People always ask if I wish we knew more about them," she said, gesturing to the spirals. "Of course I do. I wish we knew their names, their music, their stories." She paused, looking at the pillar's steady hum. "But maybe what matters most is that they trusted us enough to believe we would find this. They believed someone, someday, would listen." The interviewer asked, "Do you think we're worthy of that trust?" Lila smiled faintly. "I think we're trying. And perhaps that is the truest continuation of the story. Not a dramatic final impact, not a revelation of cosmic overlords, but an ongoing choice to listen, to prepare, to remember. Beneath deserts and ice sheets, beneath cities and coastlines, the network of chambers hums quietly across the planet, a global heartbeat of ancient intention, no longer secret, no longer myth, just memory. And in Nevada, as twilight settles, once more over Silver Mesa, the wind sweeps softly across the sand that once hid everything. The chamber rests below, stone against time, iridium against erosion. human courage against oblivion. Cat, and somewhere in that layered silence, if you stand very still, you might sense what Samuel Red sensed all those years ago. Not doom, not prophecy, but continuity. We were here before. We will face the sky again, and this time we will remember it. For all the breakthroughs, the technology, the global cooperations, something even quieter was happening. Humanity began thinking in longer sentences. Not just years, not even decades, but centuries. By 2072, planetary archives inspired by Silver Mesa had been constructed on every continent, beneath the Rocky Mountains, beneath the Canadian Shield, beneath stable bedrock in Scandinavia and Australia. Humanity carved vaults designed to outlast nations. But unlike traditional time capsules, these were not monuments of pride. They were instructions: how to restart agriculture, how to purify water, how to generate electricity from simple turbines, how to read the sky, how to remember. Engineers refer to them simply as continuity vaults, but the public called them something else: echo chambers. Not replicas of Nevada's original, but descendants of its philosophy. In 2079, a small asteroid exploded harmlessly over the Pacific Ocean, producing a brilliant atmospheric fireball visible across the west coast of the United States. No damage, no casualties, just a reminder. That night, thousands of Americans stepped outside to watch the streak fade across the sky. In Nevada, visitors gathered above Silver Mesa, watching the horizon glow faintly before darkness returned. Inside the chamber, sensors recorded a subtle harmonic swell. The pillar's hum deepened for just under 3 seconds, then returned. Too baseline. It had registered the event. It had remembered, and so had the people watching. As decades passed, new generations grew up not fearing cosmic catastrophe, but understanding it. Children learned that extinction events were part of Earth's history, but so was resilience. The skeletons found in Antarctica were no longer viewed as tragic relics. They were honored as guardians. In 2085, a memorial plaque was installed near Silver Mesa's entrance, not naming those ancient individuals because their names were lost, but acknowledging their choice. It read, "They stayed, so we could continue." Scientific exploration of the network accelerated. By 2091, 9 of the 12 original nodes had been located. Each contained variations, some with additional data structures, some with subtle differences in spiral coding, but all shared the same fundamental architecture: stone, metal, frequency, memory. The patterns suggested a civilization not obsessed with uniformity, but with redundancy. If one site were destroyed, others would endure. A distributed mind embedded in geology. And then, in 2098, something happened that no model had predicted. It was not an asteroid. It was not a solar flare. It was quieter, more intimate. During routine monitoring of the Nevada chamber, researchers detected a change in the crystal lattice's internal state. Not decay, not malfunction, transformation. The data structure appeared to be rearranging slowly, incrementally, as if responding to cumulative environmental input. After weeks of analysis, a conclusion emerged. The archive was not static storage. It was adaptive. Over thousands of years, it had been absorbing environmental data, subtle magnetic variations, seismic rhythms, atmospheric shifts. It was still learning. The implications were staggering. The builders had not merely left a message frozen in time. They had created a system capable of evolving alongside the planet, a long-term observer, a geological witness. In 2102, an unprecedented global summit convened, political, but scientific and philosophical. The question was simple. If the network is still learning, should we interact with it more directly? Sir, some argued for caution, others saw opportunity. Ultimately, the decision reflected the very lesson the chambers embodied. Proceed carefully, with humility, with continuity in mind. In 2107, humanity attempted its first deliberate input, using low-frequency electromagnetic modulation carefully tuned to match the chamber's native resonance. Researchers transmitted a simple encoded data set into the Nevada pillar. Not complex equations, not national archives, just one thing. A recording. Key was a compilation of human voices from across the globe, children laughing, elders speaking stories, wind moving through forests, ocean waves breaking, heartbeats captured from neonatal monitors, a living soundscape of Earth. The transmission lasted exactly 60 seconds. Then silence returned. For weeks, nothing happened. Then, during a routine scan, the crystal lattice revealed a new micropattern embedded at its periphery. There, the waveform matched the transmitted audio. The chamber had accepted the gift. It had integrated the present into its memory. By the early 22nd century, Silver Mesa was no longer viewed as a relic of mystery. It was recognized as a bridge between past collapse and future endurance, between fear and preparation, between isolation and cooperation. And yet, even with all the scientific clarity achieved, the most powerful truth remained profoundly simple. Sametia. Somewhere, over 12,000 years ago, human beings faced the sky on fire. They survived, and instead of rebuilding only for themselves, they built for strangers they would never meet. They trusted that someone, someday, would dig deep enough, would listen long enough, would care enough. If you walk today through the Nevada desert in the year 2120, the land looks much as it did in 1871, wind-carved ridges, endless horizon, a sky that feels larger than any human structure. Beneath that sky, beneath layers of sediment and time, the chamber continues its patient hum, steady, unbroken, carrying within it the echoes of ancient catastrophe, the whispers of forgotten guardians, the laughter of modern children, the heartbeat, of a planet that has endured ice and fire. And perhaps the greatest lesson it offers is not about impact probabilities or celestial mechanics. It is about choice. Each generation stands beneath the same restless sky. Each generation decides whether to ignore the silence or to press an ear to the ground and listen. Samuel Reed listened. Dr. Whitaker listened. Maya Hernandez listened. Leela Brooks listened. Leela Brooks listened. Kant. And because they did, humanity learned to listen to. The echoes beneath the sand were never warnings of doom. They were invitations to remember, to prepare, to build not monuments of ego, but monuments of care. And as long as the pillar hums softly in the dark, and as long as someone somewhere pauses in silence to feel the earth breathing beneath their feet, the story does not end. It continues, across centuries, across cycles, across the fragile, stubborn, beautiful persistence of us. But history has a way of refusing to remain still, and the story beneath the sand was not finished. In the spring of 2124, a graduate student at the University of Colorado, Elijah Brooks, Lila Brooks' great-grandson noticed something subtle while reviewing generational resonance logs from Silver Mesa. The harmonic baseline had shifted again. Not dramatically, not alarmingly, but measurably. For decades, the chamber's resonance curve had remained within predictable drift parameters. Now, however, its harmonic overtones displayed a faint but consistent modulation, almost like a secondary rhythm layered beneath the original hum. Elijah nearly dismissed it as instrument noise. But he remembered family stories. His great-grandmother used to tell him that the pillar wasn't just a thought, it was a listener. And listeners sometimes respond. The modulation did not correspond to seismic data, nor to atmospheric pressure changes, nor to solar flux. Instead, when Elijah overlaid the harmonic pattern against a global dataset of human electromagnetic output satellite transmissions, ground-based grid frequencies, planetary communication relays, he found a weak but undeniable correlation. The chamber's internal microstructure was aligning subtly with the electromagnetic fingerprint of 22nd century civilization. It was synchronizing, not copying, not mirroring, but synchronizing. By 2127, interdisciplinary teams confirmed the phenomenon across multiple continuity vaults worldwide: the Antarctic node, the Scandinavian node, the Australian node. All exhibited similar micro-adaptations. It appeared that the network, constructed 12 millennia earlier, had entered a new phase of activity. Not awakening, it had never been dormant, but shifting from passive recording into relational resonance. For the first time in history, humanity faced a question stranger than extinction. What happens when the past begins interacting with the present? Public reaction in the United States was complex. Some religious communities viewed it as spiritual affirmation. Some skeptics dismissed it as romanticized science. But most Americans felt something quieter, a strange pride. Because this wasn't alien contact. It wasn't extraterrestrial intervention. It was human, deep-time human. Ancestral engineers whose foresight now intersected with modern civilization. The story no longer belonged only to archaeologists or physicists. It belonged to everyone standing beneath the sky. In 2132, a proposal emerged from a coalition of American universities and international research centers. If the network is synchronizing with us, perhaps we should synchronize intentionally, not by overwhelming it with data, but by offering structured knowledge carefully encoded in the same spiral geometric logic as the original archive. After years of debate, the first deliberate continuity exchange was authorized. This time, the dataset was mathematical, timeless, culture neutral, encoded not in language, but in structure, prime number sequences, geometric constants, orbital mechanics, the universal grammar of physics, because if the builders had anticipated future intelligences, human or otherwise, mathematics would be the common bridge. In a sealed laboratory beneath Nevada's desert, scientists transmitted a structured resonance packet based on gravitational models of Earth and its moon. They encoded orbital relationships, tidal cycles, and the curvature of space-time near planetary bodies. They did not send explanations. Only patterns, only relationships. And then they waited. Months passed. Nothing. Then, one evening in October 2134, during a routine calibration sweep, the Nevada chamber produced a transient harmonic cascade unlike anything recorded before. It lasted only 0.8 seconds. But within that fraction of time, internal lattice scans revealed a newly formed geometric structure embedded at the heart of the crystal matrix. It mirrored not exactly, but proportionally the mathematical ratios transmitted 2 years earlier. The network had not merely absorbed the input, it had responded with a transformation of its own architecture, as if saying, "We recognize this. We understand." "We are still here." Elijah Brooks, now a senior physicist, stood inside the observation chamber the night the data was confirmed. He thought about Samuel Reed in 1871, pressing his ear to the sand. About Dr. Whittaker in 2038, risking professional reputation to listen. About Maya Hernandez, who insisted on patience over spectacle. About his great-grandmother, Lila, who believed the pillar was a promise. He felt the same desert wind outside, the same horizon. And for the first time, humanity understood something profound. The builders had not expected rescue. They had expected continuity. They had designed the conversation across extinction cycles. Not to prevent catastrophe, because some catastrophes cannot be prevented, but to ensure that knowledge survives long enough for recovery. Historical simulations grew more refined over the next decade. Using paleoclimate data, impact crater dating, and isotopic records, researchers reconstructed a likely scenario of the ancient collapse, approximately 12,800 years earlier. Near the onset of the Younger Dryas cooling period, a fragmented comet or asteroid swarm struck multiple regions across the northern hemisphere. The energy release dwarfed modern nuclear arsenals. Firestorms, abrupt climate reversal, ecosystem collapse. Human populations, already small and scattered, were reduced drastically, but not erased. Some survived in refugio pockets of relative stability, and among those survivors were engineers, builders, listeners. They understood the sky had changed, and they chose to prepare for the next time. In American classrooms, this chapter of history became foundational. Students were no longer taught civilization as a straight ascent from primitive to modern. They were taught cycles. They were taught humility. They were taught that technological sophistication does not guarantee permanence, but foresight increases. Survival. The Silver Mesa Chamber became a case study not only in archaeology and physics. What do we owe the future? What will strangers thousands of years from now need to know? In 2145, a child visiting Nevada with her family asked the tour guide a simple question. "Is it alive?" The guide paused, then answered carefully, "No, it doesn't breathe. It doesn't think. But it remembers. And remembering is a kind of life." The child nodded solemnly, as if that made perfect sense. Children often understand continuity better than adults. As the 22nd century matured, humanity's technological reach extended further. Permanent lunar habitats, Mars research colonies, deep space telescopes mapping near-Earth objects with unprecedented precision. Impact probability models improved yearly. Early warning systems could detect kilometer-scale objects decades in advance. But no one forgot the lesson of the chambers. Detection is only part of survival. Memory is the other. In 2160, an international continuity accord was ratified by the United States and dozens of other nations. It mandated that a percentage of all major scientific discoveries be encoded into long duration, non-digital formats, and deposited in global vaults, not just online, not just in cloud servers vulnerable to solar storms or cyber collapse, but etched, printed, engraved, embedded, redundant, Because somewhere in the ice core data and the resonance, harmonics of a 12,000-year-old tambour was proof that civilizations can fall faster than they expect. Late one evening in 2173, Elijah Eldelier turned alone to the observation platform overlooking Silver Mesa. The facility had grown over the decades, but the desert remained untouched beyond its perimeter. He stepped outside the controlled bad environment and let the wind sting his face. Above him, the stars shimmered with the same indifferent brilliance that had frightened ancient peoples and inspired them to build. He closed his eyes. For a moment, he imagined the sky 12,000 years earlier, fire streaking across it, shock waves rolling over tundra, ash blotting out sunlight. He imagined engineers huddled around early instruments, calculating trajectories without modern computers. He imagined the decision to invest scarce resources not in immediate comfort but in deep time memory. He whispered into the night, "We heard you." The wind carried the words nowhere and everywhere. In 2184, a minor but widely publicized solar flare disrupted several satellite networks, causing temporary global communication blackouts. The event lasted only hours. But during that silence, many people experienced something unusual. Stillness, without constant digital chatter, without streaming updates. The world felt older, more physical, more immediate. At Silver Mesa, backup analog systems continued recording. Mechanical instruments traced resonance lines onto archival paper. Ink on fiber. Visible, tangible. When satellites returned online, analysts compared data. The chamber's harmonic baseline had dipped slightly during the blackout, then returned to its synchronized state as networks reactivated. The connection was subtle, but real. Human civilization now pulsed in faint partnership with a structure built before agriculture dominated the planet. By the dawn of the 23rd century, humanity's understanding of itself had matured. We were no longer simply the species that split the atom, walked on the moon, or built global networks. We were the species that had survived at least one near extinction event and left instructions for ourselves. The chamber beneath Nevada sand was not a monument to fear. It was evidence of love extended across millennia. Love for strangers, love for possibility, love for continuation. And if, someday in the distant future, another generation stands beneath a sky lit by incoming fire, if seismic waves ripple once, across continents, if ash darkens sunlight and cities fall silent deep beneath stable rock on multiple continents, something will endure. Stone and crystal, spiral and frequency, mathematics and memory, waiting not to save, but to guide, aim, and perhaps thousands of years after that, another pair of hands will brush away sand. Another ear will press to the ground. Another mind will wander at a hum beneath the earth, and the echoes will begin again, not as warnings, not as ghosts, but as proof that someone, long ago, believed the future was worth preparing for. That someone believed in us. And because they did, we are still here. And we are still listening. But even as humanity matured into a civilization that thought in centuries, the universe refused to become predictable. It never does. In 2203, astronomers operating from the Lunar Farside Observatory detected a long period comet entering the inner solar system on a steep retrograde trajectory. It had likely been perturbed from the Oort cloud thousands of years earlier, long before the Silver Mesa builders etched their spirals into stone. Initial calculations were calm. The object designated Perseosto 203 would pass well beyond Earth's orbit. No risk, just another icy traveler blazing briefly through human awareness. But orbital mechanics is a discipline that punishes overconfidence. 3 weeks later, refined measurements revealed a slight but measurable non-gravitational acceleration likely from asymmetric outgassing as the comet warmed. Tiny jets of vapor altering its trajectory by fractions of millimeters per second. Fractions that compound across astronomical distances. Scientists recalculated using Newton's law of gravitation. FGM1m2R2F equals GM1 square meter. RAF equals GM1m2R2A simple. Erc equation. Elegant. Relentless. Force, mass, distance interwoven across the void. The updated model showed a narrow probability corridor, still small, but no longer zero. A 1.7% chance of Earth's intersection in 2211, to earlier generations. Such a probability might have triggered panic. To the civilization shaped by Silver Mesa, it triggered preparation. Within hours, the Continuity Accord convened. Impact mitigation protocols activated. Deep space propulsion arrays developed originally for asteroid mining were redirected toward interception feasibility studies. International cooperation was immediate, not forced. It was cultural by now, because the memory of extinction was no longer abstract. It was structural. At Silver Mesa, harmonic monitoring intensified. Researchers wondered if the ancient network had been built in response to a similar celestial event. Would it react to this one? Weeks passed. The chamber's baseline remained steady. But then, on a quiet night in 2204, the harmonic spectrum widened subtly, introducing a low-frequency oscillation not present in prior decades. It matched, almost eerily, the orbital period of Perseus 2203's projected pass. Coincidence, perhaps, but no one ignored it. For 12,000 years, the chamber had responded to planetary rhythms. Why not celestial ones? Humanity did not rely on symbolism alone. Robotic interceptor missions launched from both Earth orbit and lunar facilities. Engineers calculated required momentum transfer using conservation principles. PMVP equals MVP equals MVM. 1 equals M_1 equals M1 equals M2 equals M2 equals M2 equals M2 equals V equals V equals V equals M1 M2 momentum. Mass times velocity. Simple to write. Terrifying to scale. Perseus 203 measured nearly 3 kilometers across. Even a slight deflection required staggering precision. In 2208, the first kinetic impactor struck the comet's surface, vaporizing Brill in a brilliant plume captured by telescopes across the solar system. The resulting trajectory shift was small but measurable. Additional interceptors followed, each nudging, each shaving probability downward. On Earth, life continued. Children attended school. Farmers harvested crops. Cities pulsed with light. But there was a quiet awareness, an undercurrent of cosmic humility. This was not science fiction. This was orbital mechanics. This was the sky reminding humanity of its scale. In 2210, final trajectory models confirmed it. Perseus 2203 would miss Earth by approximately 38,000 kilometers. Close in astronomical terms, safe in human ones. The relief was global, but it was not jubilant. It was reflective, because for Duff, the first time in recorded history, Humanity had intentionally altered the course of a celestial body to prevent catastrophe. The builders of Silva Mesa had prepared memory. Their descendants had added capability. On the night of closest approach in 2211, the comet streaked visibly across the northern hemisphere sky, a luminous arc, a frozen relic older than civilization itself. Billions stepped outside to watch. In Nevada, crowds gathered again above the hidden chamber. As Perseus 2-203 reached perigee, instruments inside Silva Mesa recorded an extraordinary event. The harmonic field intensified not chaotically, but coherently. Multiple frequencies aligned in resonance, like strings on a vast planetary instrument briefly tuned to the same note. For 3.2 seconds, the chamber's internal lattice shifted into a configuration not seen before, a geometric expansion, a rebalancing, and then returned to baseline. Data analysis later revealed that the pattern mirrored the energy distribution curve of the comet's gravitational influence during its closest pass. The chamber had registered the event in its own language, stone-speaking physics. Elijah Brooks did not live to see Perseus 2-203 pass, but his granddaughter Amara Brooks stood in the desert that night. She was 12, the same age her ancestor Samuel Reed had been when he first heard a hum beneath the sand. Amara closed her eyes as the comet burned across the sky. She pressed her palm to the ground. It was warm from the day's heat, but beneath that warmth, faint and steady, she felt it, a vibration, or maybe imagination. Sometimes the difference does not matter, because what she truly felt was connection. To the ancient engineers who endured fire, to the scientists who calculated trajectories, to the generations who chose cooperation over fear. In the decades following the near-miss, Earth entered what historians later called the era of long planning. Infrastructure was redesigned with multi-century durability in mind. Energy grids incorporated geomagnetic shielding. Oceanic cities were built with sea-level variability across centuries accounted. 4. Education systems embedded orbital mechanics and ecological cycles as foundational knowledge. Children learned Kepler's laws as naturally as they once learned multiplication tables. The idea of deep time was no longer philosophical, it was practical. And still, beneath Nevada the chamber hummed, not louder, not quieter, simply present. BI 2235. Researchers confirmed that the network's internal adaptations were accelerating not in instability, but in complexity. It was as if the archive, having witnessed a prevented catastrophe, was integrating a new chapter into its silent narrative. Perhaps this was always its purpose, not merely to survive extinction, but to observe survival. In 2242, during a multinational excavation of the final undiscovered node in Central Asia, archaeologists uncovered something unexpected. Alongside the crystalline pillar lay a secondary structure, smaller, simpler, overlooked by prior surveys. Inside were carvings, primitive compared to the crystalline technology. Human figures, families, hands linked in circles. And above them, spirals descending from the sky not as destruction, but as continuity. The message was unmistakable. The builders had not only encoded physics, they had encoded hope. Back in Nevada, Amara now, a systems engineer, stood inside the observation chamber where Elijah once stood. She reviewed the latest lattice scans. They're embedded within the evolving geometry. Was a repeating proportional sequence matching both the ancient spiral architecture and modern orbital mitigation. Equations. past and present interwoven mathematically. She whispered what her ancestor once had. "We're still listening. Centuries from now, perhaps long after today's names fade, Silver Mesa will still lie beneath wind-shaped dunes. Its entrance sealed, its instruments evolved, its hum steady, and somewhere, sometime, another sky will blaze. Another generation will face uncertainty, but they will not face it alone, because beneath their feet will rest proof that humans, when confronted with oblivion, chose to prepare instead of surrender, chose to teach instead of hoard, chose to remember instead of forget. The echoes beneath the sand are not relics of fear. They are testaments of responsibility. And as long as even one child presses an ear to the ground and wonders what lies below, the story continues. Not because the universe is gentle, but because we are persistent, because we build, because we listen, and because 12,000 years ago, someone believed that someday someone like us would need to hear the hum. Ducks and cherries after Perseus 203 passed harmlessly. An even deeper realization began to take shape. It did not arrive with fire in the sky. It arrived in data. In 2261, while analyzing long-term resonance logs from all known continuity vaults, Amara Brooks and her team discovered a pattern that had been hiding in plain sight. Across thousands of years of recorded harmonic shifts, there appeared a recurring interval, subtle but consistent. Every 12,806 years, not exact to the day, but close enough to eliminate coincidence, when plotted against paleoclimatic records and known impactic signatures. The interval aligned disturbingly well with evidence from the Younger Dryas. Boundary layer, the very period believed to have triggered the ancient collapse. The recurrence suggested not randomness, but orbital resonance, human. Astronomers began examining long-period Comedory families whose aphelia lay deep in the Oort cloud. One cluster in particular exhibited a resonance with Jupiter and Saturn that could destabilize fragments on cyclical times. The underlying principle was simple, taught in elementary physics for centuries. T2 varies as a 3T2. Propto a 3T2 varies as a 3 Keplers. Third law. The square of an orbital period proportional to the cube of its semi-major, axis, elegant, predictive, unforgiving. If the ancient builders had detected a periodic celestial threat, something too large and too distant to prevent permanently, they may have realized that extinction events were not singular accidents, Zevor Chabdus in a repeating story. The realization rippled outward. If the 12,800-year cycle was real, then humanity had not narrowly avoided disaster in 2211 by chance alone. Perseus 203 might have been part of a broader debris field, outermost whisper of a recurring swarm. The true core of the swarm would not return for thousands of years. But the clock was running. Always, unlike earlier generations. The people of the 23rd century did not react with fear. They reacted with mathematics. Global space agencies began mapping long-period object families with unprecedented precision. Gravitational models extended tens of thousands of years forward. For the first time, humanity was not simply predicting near-term threats. It was modeling deep-time orbital evolution. The simulations confirmed something both terrifying and hopeful. Yes, large-scale bombardment cycles appeared plausible. But yes, given enough warning, trajectory alteration was achievable. The ancient builders may not have possessed the technology to redirect a comet, but they had possessed the wisdom to leave knowledge. Now their descendants possessed both. In 2278, a proposal emerged that would have seemed impossible centuries earlier. the construction of a permanent outer solar defense ring. Not a weapon, not a military platform, but a network of autonomous gravitational tractors stationed along predicted inbound corridors from the outer solar system. Each unit designed to exert minute, continuous force on approaching body-snudging trajectories long before danger became imminent. The concept relied again on Newtonian gravity, applied patiently over decades. Tiny forces, long durations, civilization thinking like geology. Funding debates were brief. The memory of Silver Mesa ended most arguments before they began. The ring would not guarantee safety forever. Nothing could, but it would increase the margin. And margin in celestial mechanics is survival. Construction began in 2291. Robotic fabricators assembled tractor platforms beyond Jupiter's orbit, where inbound objects could be intercepted with minimal energy expenditure. By 2315, the first operational units were in place. Humanity had extended its reach into the architecture of the solar system itself. Back on Earth, Silver Mesa continued its quiet watch. By now, its internal lattice complexity rivaled that of advanced quantum materials. It had recorded comet passages, solar cycles, geomagnetic reversals, human transmissions, and gravitational perturbations. It had become not merely an archive, but a chronicle of interaction between civilization and cosmos. In 2330, Emerlong retired, returned to Nevada one final time. The facility had changed. The desert had not. She stood where her ancestor Samuel once stood, though no marker commemorated. History had moved beyond individuals. But individuals still mattered. She placed her hand on the sand and felt the hum. Steady, unbroken. She thought of the first. Builders, anonymous engineers beneath a collapsing sky. They could not have known about gravitational tractors. They could not have imagined orbital defense rings. But they had trusted something deeper than prediction. They had trusted that intelligence evolves, that knowledge compounds, that care scales across generations. In 2402, the outer solar defense ring executed its first successful long-term deflection. A 1.2-kilometer icy body projected to pass within dangerous proximity in 2478, received a fractional but cumulative trajectory shift beginning decades in advance. No fireworks, no dramatic impact, just a slow, patient alteration, like adjusting the course of a river with a fingertip. Scientists celebrated quietly, cued, not triumph. Stewardship. By the 25th century, humanity no longer saw itself as separate from celestial mechanics. It was part of the equation, mass influencing mass, mind influencing motion. The line between natural and intentional in domination, but in participation. Silver Mesa remained central to cultural memory. Spiral architecture inspired planetary design aesthetics, educational curricula, even governance philosophy. Long arcs, redundancy, resilience, and always listing. In 2584, almost exactly 12,800 years after the Younger Dryas event, a predicted cluster of long-period fragments passed through the inner solar system. Thanks to centuries of early detection and outer ring interventions, none approached Earth dangerously. The sky lit with harmless meteoric displays. Spectacular, beautiful. Children laughed beneath streaking lights that once would have signaled extinction. Inside Silver Mesa, harmonic instruments recorded a profound resonance surged more powerful than any prior event. For nearly 12 seconds, The lattice geometry expanded into a configuration eerily similar to early Younger Dryas energy distribution. Models. Then it settled, integrated, balanced, as if acknowledging cycle met, cycle endured. Human historians later called that night the second turning, not because catastrophe struck, but because catastrophe did not. Because the cycle that once nearly erased humanity had been met with preparation instead of vulnerability, and the ancient builders, though long dust, had played a role in that survival. Their message had not been a warning alone. It had been a blueprint for cultural evolution. Centuries later still, when humanity had established thriving habitats on Mars, Europa, and orbital colonies, every settlement included a continuity vault, stone and crystal, spiral and memory, some buried beneath regolith, some beneath ocean ice, all humming softly, a distributed conscience. If you stand on Earth in the far, future millennia beyond Amara Brook Silver, Mesa may be only one of many archives across inhabited worlds. The desert may have shifted, mountain ranges may have eroded, coastlines redrawn, but beneath stable rock, somewhere something will hum, and a child on Earth or Mars or a station circling Saturn will press an ear to stone and ask, "Is it alive?" And someone wiser will answer, "No. It remembers," and in that remembering lies the true miracle. Not immortality, not invincibility, but continuity, a chain of care stretching across extinction cycles, a refusal to let knowledge vanish with the vulnerable bodies that create it. The echoes beneath the sand were never about doom. They were about inheritance, about the quiet, stubborn belief that the future deserves tools. And because of that belief, because the anomalous hands carved spirals beneath a burning sky 12,000 years ago, humanity learned to think in ape, learned to act before fire, learned to listen beneath silence. And as long as stone holds memory and minds hold responsibility, the hum will continue, steady, patient, enduring, across cycles, across stars, across the fragile, extraordinary persistence of us.